السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحابته أجمعين. أما بعد, my dear brothers and sisters and young friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullahu khaira once again for joining us at a slightly more awkward time, you could say, but as the Maghrib was getting very late and it was difficult for people, so we thought we'd start at a steady time of 8 p.m. and we can go to Maghrib and even inshallah continue after Maghrib if we need to for a short period of time, so that we can finish at a time where it's more suitable for people to get home and rest inshallah. And of course we always have the option of joining us online. Once again, we have that section for the sisters. Sisters would like to join at the front, more than welcome. And inshallah we have the brothers over here on this side, bi'idhnillah. Tayyib, inshallah. Let's begin and not waste any time as we are short on schedule. And we're going to start this week with the hadith, as we missed the hadith last week. And we're going to start with hadith number 1 from the book. Does anyone remember the name of the book? The 40 hadith of which Imam? Imam Nawawi. Does anyone know which school of thought Imam Nawawi belonged to from the 4 schools? Imam Nawawi was a Shafi'i. In fact, maybe the greatest, if not one of the greatest, scholars of the Shafi'i school. And his books are essentially the books that are relied upon for students of the Shafi'i school. An amazing scholar, a multidisciplinary scholar as well. He wrote in all the different sciences. As we mentioned, he has books in whichever science you name, he'll have a work or contribution in that field. He was one of the greatest scholars, and as I think I mentioned before, when you read Imam Nawawi, even if you're not a Shafi'i, you feel I should just be Shafi'i. That's the impact of Imam Nawawi on a person. Tayyib, let's begin with the first hadith that Imam Nawawi collected. This hadith is known as the hadith of intentions. I'll begin by reading the Arabic. We'll ask one of you, inshallah, to read the English, and we'll go into a little bit of explanation. عن أمير المؤمنين أبي حفص عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه قال. So when we have a hadith, as I mentioned previously in the introduction, a hadith will have 2 parts: a sanad wal matan. A sanad is the chain of transmission which goes all the way back to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the matan is the actual text of the hadith itself, the statement. In the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, he doesn't bring the full sanad. But what he will do, he will mention the narrator. Okay? Because Imam Nawawi lived hundreds and hundreds of years after the Sahaba, right? He did not hear directly from Umar ibn al-Khattab, did he? No, of course not. But he omits the sanad because the purpose of this book is not mentioning the sanad, it's more bringing relied upon authentic narrations to reflect on, and they are practical. So he will not bring the sanad. But if you open a book like Bukhari, you will find the whole sanad. So the shortest chain in Imam Bukhari's work is 3 narrators, and it goes up to, I believe, 9. Imam Malik's Muwatta is 1 less, the minimum is 2, and it reaches to 4 or 5 or more. But here we're just going to have the narrator. So, An Amir al-Mu'mineen, it is reported from. Amir al-Mu'mineen means leader of the believers. Abi Hafs, the father of Hafs. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu an. Of course, Umar ibn al-Khattab became Amir al-Mu'mineen after the demise of the Prophet ﷺ. He was the second Khalifa. So Imam Nawawi calls him Amir al-Mu'mineen. قال, he said, سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول. He said, Umar said, that I heard the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم say, إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله ومن كانت هجرته لدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. Then after this, Imam Nawawi mentions who narrates the hadith. He says, Imam al-Muhaddithin Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Ibrahim ibn al-Mughira ibn Bardizbah al-Bukhari al-Ju'fi. This is Imam Bukhari, this is his full name. We call him Imam Bukhari, but he's given the full name there. Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Ismail. And there's a whole story behind that name too, we don't have the time for. How did he end up with the laqab al-Ju'fi? There's a story behind that as well. And also Abu Hussein Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj, Imam Muslim also narrated this hadith, Al-Qushayri al-Naysaburi radiyallahu anhuma fi sahihayhima, in their 2 sahih books. الذين هما أصح الكتب المصنفة. And then he says, both of which are the most authentic of books that have been authored. This is the Arabic of the Hadith and Imam Nawawi's brief introduction. Who would like to read the English for us? Inshallah, any volunteers? Nah, Bismillah. Allah and His Messenger. Very good. Actions are judged by motives, niyyah. So each man will have what he intended. Thus he whose migration was to Allah and His Messenger, his migration is to Allah and His Messenger. And he whose migration was for some worldly thing he might gain, or for a wife he might marry, his migration is to that for which he migrated. Let's go into the explanation of this now. Before this though, the word niyyah itself, we call this, as I mentioned, hadith of niyyah. What does niyyah mean? Linguistically, a niyyah means a purpose, a resolve, a desire, and the more common translation that we use, it's a intention. When you intend to do something, your intention behind any specific action is known as a niyyah. Now what's the significance of this hadith? Many of the scholars open their books of hadith with this particular narration because it's one of the great principles of Islam, including the Sahih of Imam Bukhari opens with this hadith too. Abdurrahman ibn Mahdi, one of the great hadith scholars, said, if I were to write a book composed of chapters, I would place in every chapter the hadith of Umar ibn al-Khattab to do with intentions. So that whenever you begin a new chapter, you're reminding yourself, before I study this chapter, of the importance of having a good intention. Imam al-Shafi'i also said that this hadith constitutes a third of all knowledge. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah said that the foundations of Islam are 3 hadith. And the first of these is this hadith here, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. And the other 2 are other narrations that come in the 40 of Imam Nawawi. One which speaks about the concept of bid'ah. مَنْ أَحْدَثَ فِي أَمْرِنَا هَذَا مَا لَيْسَ مِنْهُ فَهُوَ رَدٌّ. Whoever introduces into this affair of ours that which is not part of it, it is rejected. A hadith which is coming soon on bid'ah. And also the hadith of Nu'man ibn Bashir, فَإِنَّ الْحَلَالَ بَيِّن وَالْحَرَامَ بَيِّن. But the halal is clear and the haram is clear. وَبَيْنَهُمَا مُشْتَبِهَاتٌ. And between them are those things which are unclear. Again, another hadith which we will explore in due course, inshallah. So Imam Ahmad said the foundation of all of Islam are these 3 hadith. Now let's look at the statement itself. All actions are judged according to intention. What is the hadith, the prophetic statement, trying to say to us? It's saying to us that for all deeds or any deed that we do to be accepted by Allah, it has to be paired with 2 things. It needs to be paired with sincerity and it needs to be paired with correctness. If any of these 2 ingredients are missing, then your action is at jeopardy of being accepted, because doing an action is not guarantee of its acceptance. That's why the ulama mention there's 2 types of qabul. Qabul in Arabic means acceptance. You have qabul isaba and qabul ijaba. Qabul isaba and qabul ijaba. Qabul isaba is that type of acceptance which means that you have performed the act outwardly correctly. I'll give you an example of prayer. You pray and you make the positions correctly and you recite the correct recitations and litanies and the Quran. Everything seems okay on face value. So that is qabul isaba. The obligation has been fulfilled. You did it. You didn't break your prayer. It's accepted isabatan in terms of its correctness. But there's another concept known as qabul ijaba, which is the acceptance of Allah truly accepting the action of yours. And إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah only accepts from those who are truly God-fearing. So if you have all the actions of prayer in place, but you are praying to impress somebody, even though the prayer looked perfect, it has qabul isaba, but not qabul ijaba. Meaning on the day of judgment, you will not see the reward of that thing because it was not accepted. Ijaba means to respond. Allah did not respond to that action of yours with His divine acceptance. Does that make sense? There are 2 types. So a person needs to ensure his action is correct. That is the correctness element. Meaning, this is why you study fiqh. The reason why you study fiqh is to ensure that your action is done correctly. You're doing the wudu correctly. You're praying correctly. Fiqh. That's where fiqh comes in. But sincerity is above that. You can know all the fiqh of prayer or any other ruling, but sincerity is something which is within the heart. And that's why it's important that we don't only study fiqh, but we pair it with genuine spirituality. And studying the hadith of the Messenger ﷺ is one of the powerful ways of bringing that sincerity within you, because of the beautiful teachings and reminders, particularly in the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi. It has that impact on you because of the nature of the narrations. So you need to be sincere. You do it for Allah, not for anybody, and you need to ensure the action is correct. Now, how do we define this in a more accurate way? Correctness means your action must be in accordance to the teachings of the Quran and Sunnah. If you do a good action, but the action was not done in the way the Quran and the Sunnah stipulates, is that action going to be accepted? Like you make up a new form of worship, and I'm going to worship Allah, and worship's a good thing, right? But that worship was not stipulated in the Quran or the Sunnah. Okay? Is that action going to be accepted? Even if your intention was pure, I'm worshipping Allah, but you made up a new form of worship, is that accepted? No. So you follow the ways and methods of worship stipulated in Al-Quran or Sunnah to ensure the action is correct. And then you need to be sincere. You do it for Allah alone. You don't do it to show off. And you're not seeking praise from anybody. You don't want anybody to praise you for your good actions, because you only did it for Almighty Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Al-Fudayl bin Iyad, one of the great scholars, said, if the action is sincere but not correct, it isn't accepted. And if it is correct but not sincere, it also isn't accepted. It's only accepted when it is both sincere and also correct. So you need these two keys here, sincerity and correctness. We also have some of the statements of the early scholars. Sufyan al-Thawri, the great faqih, said, I have not treated anything more difficult than my intention. Because it's easy to study fiqh. It's easy to learn how to wash and pray and perform umrah. It's not very difficult. But what's really difficult is to treat your intention and to ensure everything you do is done for the right reasons. That's a very difficult internal battle. Abdullah ibn Mubarak said, perhaps a small deed becomes great because of its intention. Something so small, but you had a great intention behind it, it becomes very mighty in the sight of Allah. On the other hand, someone does something so great, intention was wrong. Someone goes for Hajj, he goes for Umrah, but his intention was, I want to show off on social media so people can look at me and feel, oh, I wish I was like him. And you lose all the reward of that deed. A great deed, but because of the intention it became nothing. And a small deed, because of the intention, can become very, very big and very, very heavy on the scale. Even the Prophet ﷺ also said, أَحَبُّ الْأَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَدْوَمُهَا وَإِنْ قَلَّ. The most beloved of actions for Allah are those that are small but done consistently with good intention, rather than big actions but there is a issue with the intention. Yahya ibn Kathir also said, learn your intention, for it is more serious than the action itself. So what we learn from this is that you may have two people who do the exact same action, but they are on opposite ends of the spectrum. One is very elevated in Allah's sight, and one is completely debased, all because of something which was within which nobody could see the correctness and the level of the intention. Similarly, when it comes to type of actions, there are two types of actions. There are acts of worship and there are daily acts. In a day, you have your worship acts, your prayer, and your other acts of worship, your recitation of Quran, for example. Then you have daily acts like going to the bathroom, eating your lunch, breakfast, dinner. Daily acts, commuting to work, going to school or university. These are just daily acts. Okay, so these are the two types of actions that you'll have in your day. Let's start off by talking about the acts of worship and intention related to the acts of worship. The scholars mention that riya, so what is riya? Riya is showing off. If you have an intention from your worship to show off and it's before the act, meaning before you even start the act, from the start it was, I'm trying to impress somebody, before you started it, they mention that this is actually the level of a munafiq, a hypocrite. Because this is what the hypocrites did. It was intentional showing off. Before they started the action, the intention was, I was never sincere to begin with. This is something which is very dangerous. It is nifaq, it's hypocrisy. On the other side, you have a person who starts with a good intention, but during the act, a feeling comes in where the intention becomes slightly diluted. This may not be hypocrisy, but it's still on the level of minor shirk. Now when we talk about shirk, shirk is a heavy word, right? It means associating partners with Allah. You have two levels of shirk. You have shirk akbar and shirk asghar, or shirk duna shirk. Shirk akbar, of course, is actually worshipping an idol or worshipping another Lord except for Allah. Shirk asghar is that you still say La ilaha illallah, but your actions indicate that you are associating partners with Allah, because your actions speak louder than words. Now how is that possible? For example, it's the time of prayer, and you're praying because somebody's watching you. But prayer is meant to be dedicated to only who? Allah. If you're praying to impress somebody else, though you might not say la ilaha illa that person, you still say la ilaha illallah, but your actions seem to be indicating that you see that person as a partner of Allah, because you're dedicating your worship to him when it should have been dedicated to Allah. So that's where the danger comes in with shirk asghar, with minor shirk. The Messenger ﷺ is reported to have said, verily my greatest fear for you is this lesser shirk, lesser idolatry. So the Sahaba asked, what is lesser idolatry, O Messenger of Allah? And he ﷺ replied, it is ostentation, it is showing off. Allah Almighty will say to them on the day of resurrection, when people are being recompensed for their deed, go to those for whom you made a show in the world and look, do you find any reward of them? Meaning all of that good you did, Allah, you'll come to Allah thinking it's time to receive my reward. Allah will say, no, go to him and her who you were doing it for, to impress, and ask them if they have any reward to give you. And of course the response will be, I have nothing to give you. So you will basically be bankrupt on the day of judgment. This hadith is in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. We also have another narration in Musnad al-Bazzar that Shaddad ibn Aus reports that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, whoever prays to be seen has associated partners with Allah, and whoever fasts to be seen has associated partners with Allah. The very heavy warnings. We similarly have another narration that mentions that on the day of judgment, the first person or the first people to be judged will not be those who we deem to be the greatest criminals. You would think, if I were to ask you logically, okay, who's going to be judged first on Judgment Day? You would say those who did shirk, and then after that from the believers, you'd maybe say the murderers, the thieves, the fornicators, the alcoholics maybe, the more major sins that we see and understand. However, the hadith mentions that it won't be those people who are questioned first on Yawm al-Qiyamah. It's actually going to be the scholar, the Quranic scholar, the generous donator, the one who used to give a lot of charity, and the martyr, the shaheed. Now this seems to be the opposite of what a person would imagine. But how can it be? These are the best of people. How are they questioned first and thrown into the hellfire first on Qiyamah? The reason will be Allah will call these three groups of people and will say to them that you, O scholar, learn knowledge. Why? So that people may adore you, people may look up to you. You could take benefit from people for reputation and name, for social media. Your intention was not to do it for me. And in the world, the people gave you that. They gave you the name, and they gave you the fame, and they gave you the respect, and everything you wanted you got from them. So now go and ask them for your reward, for I have nothing for you here. And that person will go to the hellfire. Similarly, the charity giver. A person gives a lot of charity. But why does he give charity? So everyone can put his name in headlights. I built 10 masjids. I built 20 masjids. I built this many schools. And he wants it to be known that he did it. He wants it. One thing is, okay, you give charity. There is a discussion that sometimes it's good to give charity openly to encourage others and to show the strength of Islam. But if you did it and the inner intention was, I want my name to be shown, so people know my name and everyone knows who I am and thinks I'm generous. And sadly, this is the case with many who give charity. They will not give the charity unless my name plaque is there. I've seen this with my own eyes. I will not donate to the mosque unless my name is on the wall. Because they're looking for the name and the reputation out of it. There's even been cases where people have said to masjid, I will only donate if you make me a committee member. Or you allow me to make operational decisions. Meaning they're donating to charity for their own gain. Right? This is very dangerous. And this sort of person who donates charity for personal gain, and to show people and to gain a reputation for themselves, will be among the first to enter the hellfire. No matter how many masajid they built. If it was done for the wrong reason, it matters not. And finally, you have the martyr. A person, you'd think, subhanAllah, he's given his life. He's given his life. He was slain on the battlefield. But why did he, what was his intention for going to the battlefield? It wasn't to uphold the word of Allah or to defend the oppressed and to uphold justice. No. He went, why? So I can be known as the brave one. My name can become a legend, part of history. My bravery can be sung in songs and poems for years to come. That's why he went. Then that person also will be among the first to be thrown into the hellfire. So this hadith is very scary. That whatever we do, we need to ensure we do it only for Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. What are the signs of Riya? Now some of the signs of Riya, number one is that your worship in public and your worship in private, despite having ample time, there is a discrepancy. That's a sign that maybe you're doing things. You're with people and you're doing stuff, but at home, even if you have the time, you're not doing those things. That may say to you there's an issue somewhere of your intention. It's one of the signs the scholars mention. Now this doesn't mean that sometimes when you're in company, you're going to feel more motivated. That's natural. That's natural. But you will feel more motivated when you're in company. But it should not be the case that when you're at home or in public, private, there's absolutely nothing. It's just like, don't care. Yes, there's going to be a natural tafawut, a little bit, but there should be some level of worship, of ibadah in your private life that can match or come close to the level in your public life. It has to be there. It can't be a case public there's so much and private there's absolutely nothing. This is a sign that you're doing it for the people. How do you protect yourself from riya? The Prophet ﷺ in one narration encourages us to make this beautiful dua. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika an ushrika bika wa ana a'lam wa astaghfiruka bima la a'lam. Oh Allah, indeed I seek refuge with you. That I should associate partners with you whilst I know, and I seek your forgiveness for that which I do not know, for indeed you know and I do not know. So you're asking Allah, sometimes you do things that you don't realize your intention was not right. You're asking Allah to protect you also from that. And generally also the scholars mention abundant istighfar. Repentance to Allah helps a person with keeping their intention in check at all times. I'll also advise one more thing, which some call the golden minute, which is before you're about to do any good deed, like even if you're about to enter salah, one of the tips in one of the courses I went on, one of the Shaykh that gave, he said before the salah, have a golden minute. Meaning drop everything else, don't come to salah last minute, make sure you have 60 seconds and stand or sit and clear your mind of all other thoughts and focus your intention, consciously focus your intention. That this is only for Allah, I'm doing it for nobody else. Remove the distractions, remove the thoughts about family and work and school. One good tip is imagine there's a river or flowing water flowing through your mind, and in that river you're finding lots and lots of debris, work, school, stress. In that golden minute, imagine yourself picking that debris out of that water and throwing it aside. And you're left with a beautiful flowing river, calm and smooth and soothing to the ears with the sound. With that calmness, then you stand up. With that intention rectified, then you say Allahu Akbar. And as you say Allahu Akbar, even the positioning of Allahu Akbar is a position of what? When else do you do this in life? Surrender. Okay? Surrender. Put your hands up. That's what police will say to you, right? If you're in trouble. Anyone here been in trouble with the police? Hope not. Surrender. Put your hands up. Okay? This is the action of surrender. So in that moment, you're surrendering everything. You're surrendering all of the other thoughts, and you're surrendering from doing it from anyone else, for anyone else. You're saying to Allah, at this moment is only you, nobody. And then with that thought in mind, only once you've rectified that in your mind, do you tie your hand. Allahu Akbar, feel that Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar min kulli shay. Allah is greater than all things, no one else matters. Then you tie the hand, and then you'll feel that your salah now is only for Allah, not for Abu Fatima, whose daughter you want to marry. Okay? Don't do it for anybody else. So remember this principle. Allah's reward is in accordance with the intention and not the result. So even if your action is so small, if the intention is pure, it's huge. If your action is great, but the intention is poor, it is worth nothing. So be process-driven, not progress-driven. Don't focus always on big amounts of worship, which does not have a pure intention or it's being done on autopilot sometimes. Sometimes we get into autopilot with worship as well. Better than doing huge amounts which are autopilot without any thought or consciousness. Do less actions. Of course, the obligations have to be done. But do less actions which are above the obligations, of course, or at least the obligations. Even in today's time, I say, if a person does just the fara'id, but does it well, they're a wali of Allah, they're a saint. Because to hold on to even the fara'id today is hard. As the Prophet ﷺ prophesied, the time will come, we're holding on to your deen, we'll be holding on to hot coals, right? Like when you're at the MCWAS barbecue and it's very hot, you'll burn your hand, right? Who's feeling hungry? Or Eid's coming, we've got some nice things planned in the park. But that's how it is today. So in today's time, even doing the fara'id well is amazing. And you should commend someone just for doing the fara'id even. And if you can do more than that, it's great. But with the right intention. Focus on the process of making your worship meaningful than just thinking about numbers of how many rak'ah, how many juz. Quality over quantity. Of course, above the fara'id. And now we come to the last discussion for the hadith, which is about turning sand into gold. Now what do I mean by this? We're going to speak now about the daily actions. Now in your life, in your daily life, there's a lot of sand. And the sand is just the things you do. Go to the bathroom, eat, drink, commute, go to school, go to work. All of the little things you do on a day-to-day basis, it's just the sand. It's just always there. It doesn't go anywhere. It just happens day-to-day autopilot, right? There's a lot of it. But what you can actually do is turn that sand into gold just with the tool of intention. So how do you do it? Let's give some practical examples. You're going to sleep. What's your intention? Now one thing is you're just going to bed, knockout, gone. But what if you make an intention? What sort, you tell me, what sort of intention can you make to turn your sleep into gold? Your sleep into ibadah, into worship. Because ibadah is not just ritual worship, by the way. Ibadah is, so a point here about the word ibadah. The word ibadah comes from the word ubudiyya, from the word abd, which means being a slave. People today equate the word ibadah with rituals. Salah is ibadah. It is. Hajj is ibadah, which it is in fiqh sense. Ibadat refers to those actions. But ibadah, as I mentioned, in essence is being a slave of Allah. And you can even show your servitude to Allah in sleep and every other action. So you can turn sleep into ibadah. How? Yes.
Making an intention that, Ya Allah, give me some rest. So after the rest, we can wake up and I can do more ibadah for you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm resting so I can do ibadah. Even something more general. I'm resting so I can go to work, and going to work allows me to earn halal income, and with that halal income I will support family and also support those in need. So can you see you've made so many intentions there and made it so powerful that you've caused it's a chain reaction of khair from that one intention, that the sleep will lead to this, which will lead to this, which will lead to this, and you're just making it so beautiful. Okay? What about playing football? I'm building unity with my brothers, which is a Quranic command to remain as brothers, and a prophetic command to be united. Good. What else? Taking care of the body, which is an amana and a trust from Allah. I'm strengthening the body. Your football session becomes a ibadah, right? So not only are you scoring goals in the dunya, you're scoring goals in the akhirah. Okay, hat trick. What about helping a friend? Helping someone out with the intention? You helped, your friend said to you, can I borrow a pen? You borrow them a pen. You might just say, okay, yeah, use the pen. But how can you turn that borrowing of a pen into worship, for example? To make ease for somebody, intention that he will gain knowledge via that pen, which will be beneficial for him and his family. There's so many intentions you could make. You could go on and just make so many intentions. What about eating food? Chicken and chips. Energy to do more worship, to sustain yourself, to be able to go to work or go to school and study and via that earn an income and then support those in need and support your family, which is also an obligation, which is rewarded, spending on your family. What about using the bathroom? Going and relieving yourself in the bathroom. How will we turn that action? Even that can become gold. Seeking cleanliness, which is half of faith, yes. Because after using the bathroom, you can make wudu and pray and establish worship. Very good.
And for things like sleep and going to the bathroom, it's our weakness that Allah has created us weak, but we have to do this, whereas He's requiring.
Yeah, you can even using the bathroom can make you recognize Allah's greatness. I need to do this, Allah doesn't. How great is Allah?
I think going to bathroom itself is a blessing for many people who are having constipation, for example, or fast. For them to go and sit there and relieve themselves is a huge blessing for them.
Subhanallah. Using the bathroom is so neglected, but it's a huge blessing. Like so many people, they have not only constipation, they can't pass. They have to, there's people who have bags attached to their stomach and, because they can't naturally pass. Khayman, for example, yeah. And, so many illnesses. So, having an intention that I'm appreciating this blessing, I'm appreciating the body, relieving it so I can work and I can worship. You're using the bathroom every second there. Not that you should be spending a lot of time there, but every second you're in the bathroom is ibadah. How amazing is that? How easy is our deen? How beautiful is our deen? That every moment can become worship. So every daily action can become worship, and similarly you can make those actions even more powerful when you pair them with the du'as for that occasion. Because we normally find du'as, du'a before eating. Who knows the du'a before eating? What's the du'a before eating? Du'a before eating from the sunnah. Bismillah wa barakatillah. So some of the du'a books mention wa ala barakatillah, but the narration, the more accurate narration is Bismillah wa barakatillah. What about if you forget to state Bismillah wa barakatillah at the beginning and then you remember later on, what do you say? Bismillahi awwalahu wa akhirahu. What's the dua before going to the bathroom? One of the du'as is Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubuthi wal khaba'ith. What about when you come out? Ghufranak. And there's also an addition, Alhamdulillahi alladhi adhaba anni al-adha wa afani. You can also add that. Does anyone know the dua, the supplication when you make wudu? Start with Ashhadu an la ilaha. You can tell me the whole. What's the virtue? Yes, enter Jannah from any gate you wish. And then Allahumma ja'alni min at-tawwabin wa ja'alni min al-mutatahhirin. And also there's other du'as too. Allahumma ighfir li dhanbi wasi'li fi dari wa barik li fi rizqi. There's various du'as mentioned. Yes. Fayub. Slow down, I can't hear you. Slow down. Mm-hmm. Just check the wording and read it to me. Check the wording. Or after salah maybe. Okay, طيب. Let's quickly finish the hadith off, the last part. The last part of the hadith talked about migration. It said, whoever migrates for Allah and His Messenger, his migration is for Allah and His Messenger. Whoever migrates for another reason, and the example is given in the hadith of a what? Who remembers? A woman. Okay, فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. Now there's a story here. The story is, there was a woman by the name of Qais. And she was known to be very, very beautiful. And there was a man who was in Mecca originally, and he wanted to marry Qais. But Qais had then moved to Medina when the hijrah took place. And he still wanted to marry her, but she said to him, I'm only going to marry you if you come to Medina. I'm not going to marry you if you stay in Mecca. So he went to Medina and he married her. Now, on outward face value, he did hijrah. It seems like he did hijrah, right? He went from Mecca to Medina just like everyone else did. Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman, everyone else did hijrah too. But they went for who? For Islam, for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His primary intention, maybe his secondary intention was, I'm also going to Medina for Islam and the state, the Islamic state being established there. But really, it was because he was deeply in love with his beloved Qais. So he went there and he married her. So then this declaration was made, that you have to make sure your intention is completely pure. And based on this, some of the scholars say, when the person has a mixed intention, even then there is a doubt it will be accepted. You need to make sure your intention is totally pure. And try to avoid, even if you can, mixed intentions, if possible. Okay? Because this man, he went for Qais, and this hadith was then mentioned. طيب, any questions on the hadith segment? Any questions on the hadith segment before we go to fiqh? Naam.
Just with the niyyah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct. That's a good point. With niyyah, there's a cultural, sometimes in the culture, people think you have to say it loudly. So you'll find some people, they'll stand on the salah mat and they'll say, I'm praying, or they'll say in another language, 2 rakat salah. No, niyyah is simply made, I mean, you can say it loudly, but it's not from the sunnah to do that. And to believe it's necessary would be innovation. Rather, niyyah is made internally, in the mind and the heart. It can literally be a process of a second, just you saying within the mind or within the heart that I'm doing this action for Allah. Within you. And it can even become second nature. Like for example, in fasting in Ramadan, they say niyyah is a shart. But if you make your suhoor, you've kind of, the fact you're doing that suhoor and then you stop at a certain time and pray fajr, within that the niyyah is implied. That you know why you're doing it. That is your niyyah. You don't have to say, I am now fasting day 5 of Ramadan. You don't have to state it. It's simply within the mind. It's knowledge, knowing. Even for like salah. You know, okay, I'm coming for salatul asr for the sake of Allah. And you have that thought present. That's sufficient as niyyah. You don't need to state it loudly for people to hear, or even for yourself to hear. It's not a shart of niyyah. Make sense?
So it's none of the 4 mazahib?
No, none of them do. There's none of the madhahib, none of the scholars say that you need to verbally say niyyah.
Because we have seen in Malaysia, almost every masjid you go, Imam will recite the quite loudly before they start prayers.
It's not necessary to do that. Not necessary. As a person can do it if they want. They can, if they feel it strengthens their niyyah. But to do it to a level where people believe that now this is obligatory or part of the prayer would become innovation. Because the Prophet ﷺ, there's no hadith that says he ever did this. It's like, as I mentioned, the dua after prayer in one of the other classes, that you can make dua after salah of congregation. But if you do it to a level where people start believing this is part of the prayer, and if you miss it, something is wrong, that now becomes an innovation. So same here. You can make the niyyah loud if you like. It's not from the sunnah, but if you start to believe it's necessary or even recommended, and people, if you miss it, they feel something is missing, that can now go into the area of innovation. Because you've introduced something and given it a shari'i status, which it didn't have, no evidence for it in the Quran, nor the Sunnah. Not a single hadith mentions the Prophet ﷺ ever, before leading the prayers, mentioned his niyyah out loud. We have so many narrations that talk about how he prayed, but never did he say the niyyah loudly. It was always something within. So this is the better way, to do it within. If someone is doing it though, it's fine, as long as they don't believe it to be part of the prayer, but it wouldn't be something we teach or promote or recommend. That make sense?
Just with the correctness of the actions that we spoke about, if someone does an action incorrectly, but from jahl, just not knowing.
So, عذر بالجهل basically. Yeah, if a person does something incorrectly by jahl, Allah is Ghafurur Rahim, of course, Allah is merciful. If it was done incorrectly and they were innocent, then we leave the matter with Allah. Meaning in terms of the worldly correctness, qubul isaba, the fiqh, you'd say is wrong. So from fiqh perspective, it was invalid. And you would say to them, for example, if it was prayer, you need to repeat the prayer. Person can't say, oh, I didn't know. No, if from a fiqh perspective, you would say, no, you need to repeat it because that's the fiqh. But qubul ijaba by Allah, we don't know. That, if Allah knows the person had a good intention, it was a genuine mistake, that's for Allah to decide whether He accepts or doesn't accept or forgive. But in a faqih, if you go to a fatwa, they will tell you, no, it was invalid and it needs to be, if it is something that needs to be repeated, it needs to be repeated. That's what the scholar, the fiqh will say to you. So with fiqh, you stay within the rules, but Allah's mercy is something which we cannot define. We can define something we can't limit, or we can't choose who receives Allah's mercy or forgiveness or not. That's with Allah. But from this perspective, fiqh will say yes, it was invalid. Tayyib, inshallah. Any other questions? No.
If someone sets up like a regular donation thing, are they rewarded for the intention every single time?
That the recurring donation, like automated, I don't like it. Why don't I like it? I'm not saying you won't get the reward for it, but in the fact that you went and you typed in your credit card details, or even now it's automated, just press the button, it fills it for you, but you went and made that effort to donate without automating it, there's reward in that too. And I feel with these automations, automating worship, though it's convenient for people, but on the other side, we're taking away the effort. And in the effort there is reward. To remind yourself, today I need to donate, and tomorrow I need to donate. And to go and do it itself is ibadah. So I'm not going to tell you it's haram or wrong, but it's something I feel maybe we're taking away from that experience of, back in the days, how would you have to give charity? It wasn't donating. You'd have to go and find the poor person and give it. And even in that finding the poor person was an ajr. So at least the minimum we can do is to go and to actually make the effort to donate if we can. But if a person feels maybe they're going to forget or they won't, if they want to automate it, the reward is there, inshallah. But there's more reward in doing the intention, repeatedly doing the action. It's even greater. I know many people are very against this whole concept of automating worship and donation, but I can see as well where there's a utility and use. If someone's forgetful or they're busy, inshallah, as we said, Allah is merciful, inshallah, they will gain the reward for that, inshallah. Yes?
If you do an action, but you don't kind of think about the intention before you've done it, but then halfway through the action or after the action, you then remember you didn't make the intention, and then you make that intention towards Allah.
Inshallah, it will be fulfilled, inshallah. As long as when you did the action, you didn't do it to show off at that moment. As long as it was done with in that time, it wasn't done for other people. And later on, you just strengthen your intention, or in the middle of the action, you strengthen your intention, then inshallah, Allah is merciful. And inshallah, you will receive the reward for that. We don't limit Allah's mercy. As long as you didn't do anything wrong during the action, we don't limit Allah's mercy to people. Yes? As I mentioned a few tips, you have the dua, istighfar, and the golden minute, the process of actively in your mind speaking to yourself and telling yourself, why am I doing this? How am I doing this? And removing any sort of feeling that I'm doing it for anyone else. So it's like an internal dialogue, as they call it. You need to have an internal dialogue, which means maybe in the beginning stages, it's going to be taking minutes. You're having a battle in the mind, but eventually it'll become sort of second nature. And you'll be able to do it very quickly. Just quickly reminding yourself, and it will just happen, inshallah. So it's just training the mind as well, and training the self to do things only for Allah. And if you find you're doing it for anyone else, quickly remove that feeling, inshallah. It's Maghrib time now, inshallah. And after the salah, inshallah, we'll leave the setup here, and we'll continue with the fiqh. We won't go for too long, inshallah, maybe 20 minutes to half an hour with the fiqh element. Barakallah fikum. I've just seen we have 5 minutes left. I saw the time wrong. Should we do a bit now or should we break? Do you want to continue? We'll continue. I just seen we have 4 minutes. I saw that looking at yesterday's time. Okay, let's quickly begin with purity with a little muqaddimah. Okay, we'll go until the adhan. The word purity, first and foremost, understand that purity, which in Arabic is tahara, is half of faith. At-tuhuru shatrul iman. Tuhur is, purity is half of faith. As for the levels of purity, Imam Ghazali mentions something so beautiful, and he says that purity has 3 levels. The minimum level of purity, which is the one we're going to be studying, but he calls it the minimum level, is that you keep your body clean from physical and ritual impurities. But that's actually the lowest level of purity. A level of purity above that is purifying your limbs, your body parts, from doing anything which angers Allah. And the highest level of purity, the elite level of purity, is purifying your heart from other than Allah. Mimma siwallah. Cleaning your heart, removing the attachment of anyone else from your heart, and making your heart one that inclines only towards Allah. A heart that is attached to Allah, a heart that beats with every heartbeat. The name of Allah is accompanying it. That's the ultimate level through tazkiyatun nafs, purifying of the heart, where you live and you breathe the name of Allah. You live and breathe it every moment. You're in consciousness of Allah, as the hadith of Jibreel mentions. That you live your life in a state and ta'bud Allah كأنك تراك فإن لم تكن تراك كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراك فإنه يراك. That you worship Allah in a way as if He's seeing you at all times, and if not that, as if you are seeing Sorry, you worship Allah as if you are seeing Him at all times. And if not that, but you're always conscious that Allah is seeing you. That's the elite level of purity, when it's not only your body is clean, but your limbs are clean from disobedience and your heart is clean from truly loving anyone with full dedication, except from Almighty Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. However, as I mentioned in this class, we're just dealing with level 1. Level 2 and 3 is covered in a bit of the hadith actually. But we're focusing here in the fiqh element with level 1. Now the word tahara, why do we study it first? And why in books of fiqh is it always the first chapter? Because it's the key to everything else. Without tahara, there's no salah, there's no reading Quran, there's no umrah, there's no hajj. Tahara is the key to everything else. So tahara always needs to be covered first in the books of fiqh. As for definition of the word tahara, it comes from the word tahara or tahura, which means to purify. Now you have another word in the Arabic language which is nadafa. Nadafa means to clean. You're cleaning your kitchen, nadafa. Tahara is a bit different from nadafa. Tahara is more purification than just mere cleaning. So there's a slight distinction between the two words. As for the applied definition of tahara, there's many different definitions the scholars give. I'm giving you the shortest and simplest and most encompassing, Imam Nawawi's raf'ul hadath wa izalatul khabath, which basically means removing ritual impurity or lifting ritual impurity and removing physical impurity. Remember these two words I've highlighted. Al-hadath refers to ritual impurity. Al-khabath refers to physical impurity. Inshallah, we're going to today touch after Maghrib a bit on hadath, ritual impurity, and the causes of major ritual impurity. But this definition is key. Tahara means raf'ul hadath wa izalatul khabath, lifting ritual impurity and cleaning off or removing physical impurity. Inshallah, we'll continue ba'da salah. Barakallah fikum. For those online, inshallah, we'll leave the live stream running through the Maghrib salah, and then we'll continue immediately after the sunnah. Barakallah fikum.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بطغواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها. الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. ويل لكل همزة لمزة الذي جمع مالا وعدده يحسب أن ماله أخلده كلا لينبذن في الحطمة وما أدراك ما الحطمة نار الله الموقدة التي تطلع على الأفئدة إنها عليهم مؤصدة في عمد ممددة. الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله الله والصلاة. السلام علينا. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. استغفر الله استغفر الله استغفر الله. اللهم انت السلام.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Inshallah, we'll now continue with where we left off. Just before we start, though, just to answer the two questions and clarifications from what came before Salah. So one was Labib's question regarding the hadith. So the hadith he was referring to is مَا مِنْكُمْ مِنْ أَحَدٍ يُسْبِغْ, or some narration mention فَيُحْسِن. Basically it means whoever performs wudu and completes it perfectly or completes it thoroughly. That's the meaning of that word. There's three different wordings. فَيُحْسِن, and another one is فَيُبْلِغْ, then there's another one too. There's another version of the narration. فَيُسْبِغْ. Yeah, so they come in the meaning of perfecting or completing thoroughly. Perfection or completing thoroughly. And regarding the question about the niyyah, there's something that came to mind now. Now you mentioned Malaysia, something reminded me. In the Shafi'i school, some of the later scholars mentioned that making the niyyah loudly can be mustahab. Meaning, not sunnah, because we don't find a person doing it, but it can be liked if it strengthens the niyyah made in the heart. So the asl is niyyah in the heart. But if a person says it out loud and it strengthens his niyyah, then it's allowed to say it out loud. It's allowed to. At the same time though, if you start believing it to be necessary or fard, then that's where the issue would be, and it'd be better to leave it. It's like the dua after prayer, same ruling, but it's good to make dua after salah. But if people believe that it's necessary to do it, then that's where the problem comes in. So likely, because Malaysia is a Shafi'i country, that they're taking that some of the Shafi'i scholars say it's mustahab, it's liked, because it strengthens the inner niyyah to say something. Like when you say something loud, it affirms that which is within. So that might be the reason there. Does it make sense? Inshallah. But the other madhahib, they all mention that even the Shafi'is, they all say niyyah is in the heart. It's just the Shafi'is if you add a loud niyyah, it's mustahab only for the strengthening. Tayyib, inshallah. We're now talking about the impurity and the ritual and physical impurity. So as we said, hadath means ritual and khabath means physical. Today we're only talking about ritual, and we're not going to finish, we're going to start looking at ritual impurity. Now ritual impurity, hadath, has two types, major and minor. Akbar, asghar. Hadath akbar, major ritual impurity. Hadath asghar, minor ritual impurity. To ghusl. Now what are the things that cause major ritual impurity? They are 5. One of them is in red because there's a difference of opinions. I've put it in red. Intercourse, relationship between a man and woman. Discharge of seminal fluid, which is not accompanied by intercourse. Menses, which is the monthly time of the month, the period for a woman, the menstruation. And lokia, which is nifas, postpartum bleeding. After childbirth, a woman bleeds for a certain amount of days. Death of a person, of a Muslim, we'll come to that as well, and some difference of opinion there, and accepting Islam. These are 5 things the scholars mention cause major ritual impurity. Let's look at each of these one by one now with any sort of difference of opinion and evidences. Now, who was Aisha? Prophet ﷺ's wife. Who was her father? Abu Bakr. Look at what she says. She is very open. She says, إِذَا جَاوَزَ الْخِتَانَ الْخِتَانِ فَقَدْ وَجَبَ الْغُسْلِ فَعَلْتُهُ أَنَا وَرَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ فَاغْتَسَلْنَا. But when the circumcised part of the man meets the circumcised part of the woman, ghusl becomes obligatory. I and the Messenger ﷺ did this, so we performed ghusl. Now straight away, those of a more conservative mind will think, isn't that something which you should shy away from saying? That she's saying to the other companions that me and the Prophet ﷺ had this relationship and we had a bath. In some cultures, to speak about these things is very taboo, right? But here we have the wife of the Prophet ﷺ speaking openly about it. Now, why would she do so? Why would she speak so openly about such a matter? What do you think? Because it's benefit for the ummah. If she hid these things, how would we know the ruling? So it is a great blessing, and we needed her to speak about these private moments so we can know what to do in these sorts of scenarios, so we can learn our fiqh. And similarly, there's another narration where also one of the women asked about the hayd and the secretion of a woman, and then she mentions, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَسْتَحْيِي مِنَ الْحَقِّ, that Allah does not hide from the truth. Allah does not hide from the reality. Meaning, if it is the case, you have to say it, and if there's a benefit for people, you have to say it sometimes, right? So she was very open, and alhamdulillah, she was open about this when we learned this ruling. That when the circumcised part means the circumcised part, ghusl becomes obligatory. Now, what does it mean by the circumcised part? It means that when a man and woman engage in relation, it's not that the man needs to release his fluid, the semen, that now he needs to do ghusl. Just the act of penetration means ghusl is now obligatory. Even if nothing happens after that. Just that act, even if it's a second. Ghusl, when the two parts meet, the khitan and the khitan, ghusl is now obligatory. Now some of the Sahaba differed on this ruling. And why did they differ? And this is going to explain how, an example of difference of opinion and how the scholars come to a ruling. Some of the early Sahaba, they would not make ghusl unless there was ejaculation of the man to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ saw that obviously he had a bath and he was wet and he realized what had happened. So he said to him, La alayk, but you didn't need to do that. Inna al-ma'a min al-ma', that water is from water. Meaning indicating towards the fact that you didn't need to have a bath. You didn't need to have a bath. Inna al-ma' min al-ma', that it was okay. So this was what some of the Sahaba knew, and this is what they practiced on. So they never used to have a bath if they were just engaged in the act of intimacy with the wife, unless there was a finishing. Later on, because this was a big ikhtilaf, the Sahaba were differed on this. Umar radiallahu anhu wanted to bring everyone to one understanding. So he gathered the Sahaba and he mentioned the narration of Aisha. He said, look, this is the Prophet's wife. Who knows better than her? She says very clearly that this happened with them and they did ghusl. Does anyone have an objection on that now? Everyone said, no, we will submit to what Aisha said. Because she knows, as the wife of the Prophet, she knows best. So what's the explanation now? So you might say the two hadith are contradicting one another. One said with Rafi' that the Prophet said, La alayk, you don't need to do anything. And here Aisha saying, no, this is what we did. Is there a contradiction? No, there's no contradiction. It was a case of something we call nasakh, abrogation, where there was a ruling originally and later the ruling changed. And normally nasakh will have a reason. In the beginning, the ruling was a bit more flexible because people are new to Islam, so the ruling was more flexible. Later on, when Islam became established, now the final ruling was implemented and introduced. This is known as abrogation, but abrogation usually has a cause for the abrogation. So here it was taysir. Earlier there was an easier ruling, later on the standing ruling was implemented. And we even have a narration, a version of the narration of Rafi' that Imam Tahawi mentions. Imam Tahawi, for those of you who have not heard, who's heard of Imam Tahawi before? Al-Tahawi is a very interesting story. He started off a Shafi'i and he became a Hanafi. And there's a story behind it that his uncle was Imam al-Muzani. Imam al-Muzani was basically the top student of Imam al-Shafi'i, transmitter from Imam al-Shafi'i. So he's very close to the Shafi'i school. His uncle is Imam Shafi'i's direct student. So Imam Tahawi, when he was maybe young, he wasn't maybe the best student. So his uncle said to him that you're never going to amount to anything, basically, to summarize what he said. Nothing is going to come from you. And he got really upset with this. So he said, no, I'm going to prove my uncle wrong. And he set out and he became one of the greatest Hanafi scholars of all time. And not only of Hanafi fiqh, but of hadith. So he's written a book called Sharhu Mushkil al-Athar, which is a book studied by scholars of all madhabs. Why? In that book, he takes all the narrations that seem to contradict one another and provides solution. Of course, with a Hanafi framework, but he shows that there's no contradiction in the narrations. An amazing masterpiece. Sharhu Mushkil al-Athar. So Imam Tahawi in that book, when he mentions this seeming contradiction and he's bringing the jam' and the solution, he brings another version of the narration where the narrator actually says, ثُمَّ أُمِرْنَا. After this, we were later commanded to do the ghusl, which shows it was an earlier ruling that was later abrogated. Now all the madhabs are agreed on that ruling, that إِذَا جَاوَزَ الْخِتَانَ الْخِتَانِ, that will mean you need to make ghusl now. As soon as the act of penetration, even of the upper portion, just slight takes place, you have to do ghusl. Okay? Is that ruling clear? So this helps us to appreciate how the scholarship developed to understanding the hadith and how the scholars synthesized. There's a related discussion here that we need to cover though. Because if you look at the wording, it says khitan. Khitan refers to the circumcised part. Like say khatna means the circumcision. Some cultures call it khatna, right? Now, okay, for a male that's understood, you do khitan. What about for a female?
Some cultures do that.
Very good. So some cultures do female circumcision. It's illegal in this country. We do not promote it. And I'll explain. Now regarding the explanations of the scholars, they say in the fiqh books, there's 3 different opinions about female circumcision. Minimal female circumcision. It is either sunnah, mustahab or mubah. Okay, sunnah, mustahab or mubah. 3 rulings you'll find. However, they were not speaking about what we call today FGM, female genital mutilation, which is a procedure done in some countries which is harmful. It's harmful to the woman. Islam does not promote harm to anybody. No procedure that causes harm is allowed in Islam. Okay? We do not harm ourselves. So we're not talking about FGM here, female genital mutilation. What we're talking about is a process which even the Arabs used to do. And it was a very, very, very slight circumcision, which did not cause any sort of harm, and it was considered normal in the culture of that time. Okay? So it's very important when we study history, we don't project our modern understanding of things onto history. This is known as the HCM, which is flawed, the historical critical method. We cannot judge the past on the standards of the present. We need to look at things holistically based on in their culture, it was seen as totally normal. And it was a very minimal process that did not cause any harm. It's not the same of what we call FGM, female genital mutilation today, which is harmful. So in today, we don't promote the practice, and particularly because where the procedure is done, normally it is harmful today. So we don't promote this practice today. We do not say that a person should do this. It's not fard or obligation or anything to begin with. So it's not something that we need to promote or promote. That makes sense? Okay, just to clarify the word khitan. Now, the next cause of major ritual impurity is discharge of seminal fluid. Discharge of seminal fluid which is not involved with intercourse. And this is for a male and a female. There's actually an interesting narration that when this was mentioned, one of the female sahabiyat said to the Prophet ﷺ, I believe it was Sulaym radiallahu anha, if I'm correct. She said to the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, I think I have the narration here, yes, in Sahih Muslim. And Anas ibn Malik حدثهم أن سليم, yes, it was Sulaym. حدثت أنها سألت نبي الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So Sulaym asked the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم about a woman who sees in a dream that which a man sees. So the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, if she sees that, then she must also have a bath. And Sulaym became shy upon this. And she said, is this possible that a woman also sees this thing in a dream and has secretion of bodily fluids? And the Prophet ﷺ said, yes, of course. From where did the similarity come? Okay, so we find this hadith, again, Sulaym, she was shy, but also she clarified the ruling because it needed to be clarified, right? طيب. So a male or female discharge of seminal fluid. A discussion though is about what happens if you're asleep or you're awake, because this can happen either when awake or asleep. So when you're asleep, according to all scholars, you do ghusl. If you're sleeping, you wake up, you see you see semen in the undergarments, you will make ghusl. Before you can pray, you need to make ghusl. Okay? What about if you're awake? Now there's a difference of opinion in the scholars here. And the difference of opinion is in regard to whether that release of semen was due to pleasure or due to another reason like illness or being hit. Some of the books mention apparently if someone hits you very hard, it can cause that to happen. Don't try that at home. Okay, but that's what they mention. Please don't try that at home. Right? In the fiqh books, you sometimes find things which are there, which are not to be tried. But it mentions illness or hitting someone very hard can cause a release. So if it's from pleasure, then it's agreed upon that you need to do ghusl. Or even pleasure and it's like looking at something or kissing the wife or something like that, ghusl. If it's due to an illness or a heavy strike though, a condition, the Shafi'is will say to you, still have to do ghusl because you've still released. But the Hanbalis and the Hanafis will say, there's no ghusl. You don't need to do ghusl, but they'll mention do wudu. But you don't need to do ghusl if it was due to an illness. If it was released due to an illness. Only from pleasure for the Hanbalis and the Hanafis. Another question, yes. So I had a look into the Malikis and I found contradicting things, and I'm not an expert in the Maliki school, so I omitted that because I don't want to speak for the Malikis without knowing for sure. You have to consult a Maliki expert on that. So a lot of the time when I mention difference of opinions, I will miss certain madhahib because I couldn't find the relied upon or ruling for them, and I don't want to attribute it wrongly. So I'll mention that which I am confident in mentioning. As for where does it need to exit from, okay? Because remember that seminal fluid is produced in the body, but it's released from the front, but it's produced within the body, and then it's released from the organ, right? So Imam al-Shafi'i and Imam Abu Yusuf. Abu Yusuf was Abu Hanifa's, one of his two main students. They take the opinion, it's when it exits from the maqar, from the qubul, when it exits from the actual organ. Meaning if it produces in the body but doesn't actually end up releasing. One of our teachers, when we were studying this, gave a funny example. He goes, if you tie a string on your private area so that the pipe is closed, and then it happens, but it can't exit, then according to them, ghusl will not yet be obligatory until it comes out. Because it hasn't actually come out yet. It's still in the body, even though you felt the sensation and it's been produced. Okay? Imam Abu Hanifa though, and Imam Muhammad, his other student, and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, they say no. As soon as it comes out the place of origination, the sulb as they call it, then even if it doesn't come out from the front, the bathing is still obligatory upon you. Make sense? Okay. So discharge of seminal fluid is number 2. Now, I want to mention a fiqhi principle here. قاعدة فقهية. الخروج من الخلاف مستحب. Exiting from the difference of opinion is desired. It's preferred. Meaning, you've got different opinions. But if there's one route you can take where there will be no difference of opinion, if everyone says you did the correct thing, do that. It's better. So in this case, just take the most strictest of rules. So in the case of asleep or awake, just doesn't matter. I'm just going to have a bath, whether it was pleasure or not. And where does it need to exit the difference of opinion? So even the Shafis are included. And similarly here, where does it need to exit from? Okay, whether you feel the sensation, whether it comes out or not, but go with the safer ruling and just on the side of caution, have a bath. Just make it easier, and there's no difference of opinion left. And this will apply in many, many cases. For example, I'll give you one more example of where you can apply this. You know when you're doing wudu and you're doing mess of the head, there's a difference of opinion of how much is the minimum amount you need to do. The Shafi'i say 1 hair or 3 hairs or part of a hair, very small. Then the Hanafi say quarter of a head. Okay? And the Maliki say you have to do wudu of mess of the whole head, isti'ab. Now what should you do if you know that's the case? If you know that the Maliki say you need to cover the whole head, the Shafi'i say a little bit, just a hair or 2, and the Hanafi say quarter, just go with the do what the Maliki say. Do the whole head. It's sunnah anyway, more reward. Do the whole head, and everyone says to you your wudu was done, rather than go with the Shafi'is and just do this, but the Malikis and Hanafis will say that your wudu wasn't done. Unless there's a reason, try to just go with the ruling that all of them say it's valid. Of course, if there's a reason you can't, that's fine, because you're still following one of the schools. But if you can get out of the ikhtilaf, it's better. So, qaida fiqhiyah. The next, number 3, the third cause of major ritual impurity is menstruation and loqiyah. Menstruation, as I mentioned, is the time of the month. A woman every month has a menstruation before she reaches old age, of course, and the menopause. And loqiyah is postpartum bleeding after giving birth. We call it nifas in Arabic, and the monthly bleeding is hayd. She bleeds for a number of days. So, of course, after that period ends, before she can pray and be pure again, she needs to do a ghusl. However, there's also something known as istihada, which is irregular bleeding. So in the case of nifas, after 40 days, if she's still bleeding, then it will count as irregular bleeding, meaning she'll have a bath and will begin her worship. And similarly with hayd, There's different rulings, and we'll come to that in due course. But the Hanafi ruling, if it's less than 3 days or more than 10 days, this is irregular bleeding. The other madhahib have tafsil, and we'll come to that when we reach there, inshallah, detail. Then, for example, she does 10 days, it goes over 10 days, 240 hours, then there will be irregular bleeding, and now she needs to make ghusl and begin praying. So she is in the state of impurity, physically, haqiqi, but in terms of the hukm, in terms of the ruling, she's no longer a major ritual impurity. She just does the bath and begins praying. Okay, so that's the third. The fourth one is death. Death of a Muslim. But there's an exception to that, which is a martyr, a shaheed. When a Muslim dies, of course, we give them ghusl. And then we shroud them and we bury them. But the person who's a martyr, he has a special ruling. Because the martyrs are alive. But ahya, in a way we cannot understand. عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. So they don't need to have a bath. You don't need to bathe the martyr. They are buried without the ghusl. That's the virtue of the martyr, because they are ahya. It's as if they are alive. But the normal Muslim who dies, they will need a ghusl before you bury them in the shrouding. Hanafis also add that if you have a rebel, a mischief-making rebel, who is calling for disobedience and calling for armed uprisal against the Muslim ruler and is causing mischief among the body of Muslims, meaning he's a confirmed rebel, harmful to the believers, that person will also not be washed. Why? Why would they not be washed? What do you think the reasoning behind that is? There's a reason behind it. Why would you not, they're still a Muslim, but why would you not wash the rebel who has raised their arms against the state and the Muslims and caused mischief in the town or in the country? Why do you think the Hanafis say that? What could be the possible reasoning for this ruling of the Hanafis? No, they're definitely not a martyr. They're a bona fide, confirmed mischief maker, rebel. And they have no good grounds to be doing what they're doing. They're just causing mischief in the land. Like legit mischief maker. Why would you not wash them?
Is it to keep them in that state?
No. Deterrent. It's a deterrent that if you're going to cause mischief, we're not even going to wash your body. It's a very strong, like the person will think, they're not even going to wash me if I do that. So the next person will think twice before causing mischief in the land and bloodshed. They will think twice because they're not even going to wash my body. And they also say, they advise that the janazah should not be performed by the people of righteousness. That the imams and the scholars should not go perform the janazah of the person known for being a mischief maker in the land and causing harm to the people. As a lesson that if you do this, we will not wash you, we won't even pray your janazah. It'll just be few people will pray your janazah quietly and bury you, put you in the ground, but the kiram and the honored people will not even pray your janazah. No.
Aside from it being a deterrent, is there any other evidence specifically pointing towards that?
No, so it's the Hanafis' qiyas here. They've used their reasoning as a deterrent. So that's, again, it's part of the sharia, you can do that. That's the framework. And there will be incidents, there's incidents in the seerah where the Prophet ﷺ instructed certain people to not pray janazah over certain people. Sorry? Munafiqs and others too. Suicide is a bit more of a complicated case. What was the reason the person committed suicide? But yes, the fuqaha do mention if a person commits suicide, the kiram will not pray the janazah upon them. It'll just be few people will pray the janazah, like in a kind of hidden way, and they'll bury the person. Of course, in today's time, there's mental health consideration. You have to look at each case on a case-by-case basis. But yes, that is mentioned by the fuqaha, because you don't want to normalize the action. Because if everyone comes, the imams, and they all go to that janazah, it seems to be normalizing that, but this is okay to do suicide. So as a deterrent, they advise that no, the janazah of the person of suicide should just be done quietly, instead of publicly, openly, and the honorable people going to it. Of course, there are exceptions. You have to look at the case. Was it mental health? Was there another reason? And it has a nuance to it. But it's basically trying not to normalize sin. These deterrents are there to stop normalizing sin. And it will make people think twice about, do I want to be in that situation? People won't pray my janazah. The imam won't even pray my janazah. They won't even wash my body for these sorts of major, major sins. So can you see the logic and reasoning behind it? Yep. The last one is accepting Islam. When a person accepts Islam, he says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Then according to the Hanafis and the Shafi'i, they don't need to have a bath. It's not obligatory, but it's recommended. Why is it recommended? Because bathing is like a sign of purification and renewal. So we recommend, you accept in Islam, take a bath. Imagine that as you wash yourself, the sins is dropping from you, because this is a day of purification. So it's recommended. Only if the person was in the state of janaba, then it would be obligatory according to Hanafi and Shafi'i. Like if he had intercourse and hadn't bathed himself, then it would be obligatory. However, the Hanbalis and the Malikis, they actually say that in any case, the person has to have a bath. It's obligatory to have a bath for the person who is accepting Islam. It's not optional. And their evidence for that is a hadith of Thumama ibn Uthal, famous Sahabi who accepted Islam. The story is very famous. He was the Sahabi who implemented the economic boycott on the Quraysh. He was the leader of the Banu Hanifa tribe, very powerful tribe. He was in control of grain stores. And he was captured, and then he was brought to Medina, and he was tied to the pillar, and he stayed there for a number of days. And every day the Prophet ﷺ would come and see him and say to him, what should I do with you, O Thumama? And he would say to the Prophet ﷺ, in taqtul dha damin wa in tun'im ala shakir. If you kill me, you've killed someone who is dha damin, a person of blood. Either meaning a person whose blood will be avenged or an honorable person. And if you are favorable to me, then you are favorable to a person who's going to be very thankful. So eventually, he was released. And he decided, after seeing the amazing conduct of Medina and the environment of Prophet ﷺ's treatment, he wanted to accept Islam. So he was instructed, Thumama, he was a non-Muslim, to go out, bathe and come back in the hadith. So from that, the Hanbalis and Malikis say, look, the Prophet ﷺ told Thumama to bathe and then come back, which shows you have to have a bath before accepting Islam. And there's also other narrations with a similar effect. The others will argue, the Hanafis and Shafi'is, yes, there were a couple of cases of that, but we also have so many other cases of people, how many people accepted Islam in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, thousands and thousands, and we don't find him on every occasion telling them to do bath. So maybe that, he said that to a few people on those occasions as something recommended, but for example, when the conquest of Mecca took place and there was mass conversion, he didn't make a general statement, everybody has to take a bath. We don't find that. So the Hanafis will say, those narrations where a few occasions he did, will take that to be a recommendation. It's good to. But we wouldn't say it's obligatory. If it was obligatory, you would have found narrations that every single time the Prophet would have commanded this, but he didn't. So you have evidences on both sides. Yes?
Can you expand on only if they were previously in the state of janaba? So is that regarding people before they take their shahada?
So even before they take the shahada, if they had the night before had a relationship with their wife and they hadn't had a bath yet, they're still in the state of major ritual impurity. So they will say for that person they should take a bath.
So do you not only exit out of the state of janaba if you do ghusl, but it doesn't come with like certain conditions?
Which conditions?
Intention.
No, so major ritual impurity applies on you whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim. Meaning if you've done intercourse, you are in a state of hadith, whether you are Muslim or not. Now, if you want to come into Islam, you should come into Islam in a state of ritual purity, not impurity. So you would say to them, have a bath. Now, practically, you don't know that. You're not going to ask the person, did you have a relationship with your wife? So if you're involved in da'wah work, shahada work, it's good to recommend. By the way, if they did that and they took the shahada, the shahada is still valid. But if, for example, a person comes to you, and I'm going to do shahada in a couple of days, and they are, what should I prepare? You will say to them, one of the things you should do is take a bath. But if you're in a dawah store and someone comes and they want to take shahada on the spot, you can give them shahada on the spot. Practical. This is the practical side now. And then you can tell them, go home and have a bath now, kind of thing. One of the things you should do. Make sense? Yes.
Would you explain to them how this was done when you tell them that you make the intention of doing a ritual essentially before they take their shahada?
No, the way you'd explain it, remember, you have to be careful with your words. You wouldn't explain it as hadith. You just say, bathing is a sign of purification. One thing is the rule, and one thing is how you should approach this. So with a non-Muslim, you don't want to say to them, you're in impurity, right? They're going to be like, it's a bit much for them to hear that and they're coming to take their shahada. So you just say to them, it's advised to take a bath because with the water flowing on your body, the same way your sins are going to fall off, you clean your body, it's a symbol of purity, renewal, you come fresh. for their experience. You phrase it in that way with them.
Just generally when they do take a bath, let's say they take the shahada already, but and for people who haven't taken their shahada, would they still be considered to be in janaba even if they haven't had relation?
Yeah, if they haven't had a bath, they're in janaba.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of non-Muslims would probably be in janaba.
Yeah, of course. So this is why you can take the shahada with them in that moment, based on the reality of modern day style of da'wah, but then you'd say to them, take a bath. As one of the advice, take a bath. Because likely they will, possibly, not maybe, in the state of janaba. Yeah. Yeah, there's 3 conditions. Again, this was going to come later on, but just to mention them quickly here. Very quickly, gargle the mouth, pass water into the nose, and ensure every single hair of the body, or if you don't have hair, every single piece of skin where a hair would grow, basically the whole body, all of the body, water reaches there. That includes in the nooks and the crannies, behind armpits, knees, everywhere. Water must reach on the surface of the body, the whole body, by the water must reach. Of course, niyyah is there, of course, niyyah is there. So with niyyah, the Hanafi is different from the Shafi'i. So for example, I'll give you an example of a swimming pool. According to the Hanafis, if you go swimming and water, clean water has touched your whole body and you didn't make intention of wudu, your wudu is done. Because their reasoning is that the action was done, meaning the purity was attained because the water touched all those parts. So they'll tell you wudu is done. The Shafi'is will tell you, no, niyyah is a condition. You need to have a niyyah, I'm doing wudu. So you can go swimming and in the swimming pool say, part of the swimming I'm having wudu by the water touching my body. So there's khilaf there. Again, getting out of the khilaf, if you just use the Shafi'i ruling and make an intention that I'm doing wudu, like when you go in the bath, is make intention of doing wudu, then you're fine. But the Hanafi ruling is that you don't need to make the intention because the action, because this wudu here, though it's an ibadah, but the ibadah is in the action itself, meaning the water reaching the body. As long as the water reaches those parts, meaning you've cleaned those parts, the purpose has been fulfilled and the wudu is fulfilled. That's the Hanafi explanation of that. So there's 2 opinions on that. Yeah, so you don't apply the same thing for ghusl. So again, if you need to do ghusl and you jump in a swimming pool and you don't have intention, the Hanafis will say it's done. As long as the water reached everywhere, and water would have to go in the nose and mouth, of course. You'd have to gargle and put water in the nose.
So my question was more so like, obviously if they were non-Muslim before, whenever they do take a bath, they're more than likely not going to be gargling their mouth and their nose.
So it need to be explained that this is the method of ghusl. In the non-Muslim starter pack you give them, or you have there the method of ghusl, method of wudu.
So if they're like an adult, let's say adult man, more than likely, then they've just been in the state of janaba by default because they've never done it before.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, they probably would be. Most likely they would be. But then again, remember, it's possible they've gargled their mouth, cleaned out their nose. You never know. You don't know, really. But you would advise to take a ghusl, either before or after. Yes.
Imam, I just want to get some clarity. So I've seen when it comes to the issue of what you mentioned about describing those different scenarios, I've seen many Muslims on different madhabs, and they have very weird different ways of doing wudu. And we all know that the Prophet ﷺ did wudu in a procedure, making sure that it was done properly. I've seen brothers, I've even seen family members, female family members, they do wudu and you can count to 10 and they're finished.
Yeah.
How does that sort of relate?
So we'll cover this in detail when we reach wudu. We've got a while to go. But in a nutshell, the reason why you might be seeing that, because wudu has different stages. You've got fard wudu, sunnah wudu, and then above the sunnah wudu, which is the full process with perfection and 3 times. Fard wudu, the minimum wudu, is actually very, very, you can do it in 20 seconds, the fard wudu. Not that we recommend that, but it's a scarcity of water or time. All you have to do, okay, is obviously you've got water on your hands first. You wipe the face once, all the way around. The arms, once. The hair, you can literally just do that. And wash the feet to the ankles once, and your wudu is valid. Your wudu is valid just by doing that. There's a fara'id. Fara'id of wudu only 4.
So which madhab is that?
All. These are the fara'id. No, not even more. The outer, but not the inner. Just the face. Just the outer surface of the face. The hands, which is part of the arms, of course. And the quarter of the head. Masah. For the Hanafi schools, quarter, Malikis is full, Shafi'is is even less, Shafi'is is even less than that, so it's a hair or two, and the feet. That's it.
So they don't, I've seen they don't even, they just like sprinkle on the arm.
No, that's no. It has to be the full arm until here. And similarly, the feet till, including the ankles. Including the ankles. So it has to be done fully.
Okay, so they can't do sprinkle water.
No.
Exactly, that's what I thought.
It has to be washed. And it has to be balal, there has to be water, has to be dripping. It's not sufficient just to sprinkle water, no. It has to be washed in a state that there is a drop, the water can drop from it.
Sheikh, this may be an irrelevant question. As a layman like me, do I need to have one of these four mazhabs?
So we answered that previously. Basically, in a nutshell, what we mentioned was Allah makes it very easy for us. He just says, ask a person of knowledge, ask the people of remembrance if you do not know. For a lay person, there's a principle, an-aami la madhhaba lahu. The lay person has no madhab. All you need to do, if you want to keep it simple, ask a scholar you trust. He gives you the ruling. He's a reliable scholar. He has credentials, not TikTok scholar, proper scholar, got qualification. You're just a normal guy trying to go about your life. Shaykh, how do I do this? He gives you the ruling. Khalas, you follow that. You are responsibility done. Allah is not going to question you on Yawm al-Qiyamah, why didn't you do this and do that? So for a normal person, he has no madhab. He could just follow what his local scholar trusts. Or if that person wants to follow a madhab, he can. If he has a book that follows a certain madhab, he's following that book, that's also no problem. But for the ami, there's flexibility. Either a reliable scholar or a madhab. Okay? What the ami shouldn't be doing is pick and choosing his own opinions. Because that's following the desire. Just, take this opinion from here, I like that. No. You follow a scholar or you follow a madhab. You follow scholars, or even it can be some scholars, a group of scholars you know and trust. You go with what they say to you, or you follow a madhab. Okay? For the student of knowledge though, for the person studying more seriously, they must take a madhab as a path of study, as a methodology. It's like a degree path, a track. If you're going to be all over the place doing all different degrees at one time, you're going to be confused. So you must take a madhab as a path, a track of study which you follow, and then you take that track and then you take the other track if you want to, you expand the tracks and you can do comparison afterwards, and eventually you reach a stage of ijtihad, of being able to compare between them. But you must take a well-trodden path for a student. So you start with Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanbali, and then you progress from there for a student. Lay person though doesn't need to do that. They just simply follow scholars they trust, or a madhab of their people, of their culture. Now you're from a culture, everyone's Hanafi, I'm just going to follow the Hanafi. My culture is from Africa, we're Shafi, just follow the Shafi, follow what the culture is telling you, because they're following a madhab, and just stick with it. Like some people are Hanafi without knowing what Hanafi is, they're Shafi without knowing what Shafi is, because they're following the madhab of the people. They don't even know they're following Shafi madhab. Like I teach in the school, some boys are literally Shafi, they don't even know they're Shafi, just like, I'm just following the Somali culture. Oh, Shafi. They didn't know they're Shafi. That's fine. For the lay person, they don't need to know all of these extra details. You can just follow. Inshallah. Yes.
After a voluntary ghusl, do you have to do wudu? Or is that
No, so wudu can be included, because obviously part of ghusl is you're doing those limbs washed, and wudu is included within ghusl, if you have the intention. So when you make intention of ghusl, wudu is included in there. Because wudu ghusl is a higher form of purification than wudu. So wudu, because but if you have, it's not fard ghusl, but you had intention in that ghusl. Yeah, so if it's not, you need to make the intention of wudu with the ghusl. So you're going for a shower. You're talking about a shower basically, a normal shower. Yeah, then you must make the intention of, for the Shafi'i school, you must make the intention of wudu. According to the Shafi'i school, yes. Hanafi will say it's done, Shafi'i will say need to redo, because you didn't make an intention, if you're just going for a general shower. But if you make intention, I'm going for fard ghusl, then because ghusl is a higher form of purification than wudu, is included within that. Because you already made intention of purification. Yes.
So I just wanted to ask you a question about the previous points you were covering about impurities and emissions of fluid. So just to get some, again, clarity. So when it comes to the situation for males, and obviously I can see that you emphasize the point about ghusl and the importance of ghusl. So when it comes to, for example, ghusl for males in those circumstances, but yet it's not possible to do ghusl because you may be outside or traveling, what do you suggest in terms of those ghusl necessities?
So before you're able to pray, you have to do ghusl. Okay, that's the rule. Now, of prayer is 5 times a day. In a case where you have no access to water at all, there's no access to water to have a ghusl, then you are able to do tayammum, like you're in a desert. And there is a hadith about this. One of the Sahabi, we mentioned in one of the previous sessions, he was in a place, احتلمت في ليلة باردة. It was a very cold night in the wilderness, and he had ihtilam, and he had to lead the prayer in the morning, and he did tayammum. Prophet said, he smiled at him, that what you did was fine. But if you're able to access water, enough water to have a ghusl, and by the way, you don't need a lot of water to do a ghusl. It's simply enough water to gargle through your mouth, to clean your nose, and to just have a basic amount of water over your body. It can be done in a couple of bottles of water, essentially. Then you must find a way to do the ghusl. Okay? But yeah, if there's no water access to do ghusl, then tayammum, which is the dry ablution, which again we'll cover further on, inshallah. Barakallah feek. طيب, we'll end it there, inshallah. I actually need to head somewhere for 10 o'clock. So if you have any questions, please do add them to the group. Any further questions, the WhatsApp group is there. Bi'idhnillah, you can put your questions there. Inshallah, we will answer them. Barakallah feekum. I think the time of 8 p.m. worked, alhamdulillah. So we'll keep it at 8 p.m. Going forward, inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdik, subhanakallah wa bihamdik, wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruk wa natubu ilayk. Barakallah feekum.